A thick morning mist rolls over the North Sea, hiding a looming fleet of dragon-prowed longships. Dagmar the Viking raider stands at the prow, scanning the English coastline with fierce determination. In a humble Saxon village, Ealdred the Elder heads to the central gathering square, leaning heavily on his weathered staff as villagers start their day. Freydis the Shield Maiden flexes her gloved hands, watching the distant coastline through narrowed eyes, her sword and shield ready. Ceolwyn clutches her child tightly upon hearing rumors of foreign ships spotted off the coast, fear shadowing her hazel eyes. The lead Viking longship skims over the shallows and grinds to a halt on the English shore. Dagmar leaps into the surf with a mighty roar. Ealdred gathers the village men, instructing them to prepare defenses with whatever tools they have. The old church bell rings out a warning. Freydis vaults from the ship to the wet sand, rallying the other warriors with shouts as they prepare to storm the settlement. Ceolwyn helps shepherd terrified children and the elderly into the wooden church, her dress trailing in the mud as she glances nervously over her shoulder. Dagmar leads the first charge into the outer fields, hewing down a scarecrow with his axe as a warning to any Saxon defenders. Ealdred orders archers to take positions inside the church tower, determined to slow the Norse advance. Freydis spots the archers. With quick signals, she sends 2 Vikings to outflank the tower, while she charges up the main road. Ceolwyn tries to keep the frightened children quiet as arrows streak past the church's stone walls, the sound of battle growing closer. Dagmar's axe finds the first Saxon defender in the field, and the 2 grapple fiercely amid the trampled wheat. Ealdred joins others in reinforcing the barricades around the church, spitefully jamming broken carts and barrels against the entrance. Freydis and her warriors burst into the edge of the village, clashing with a group of desperate men wielding spades and pitchforks. Ceolwyn, with the church packed tight, finds a small gap behind the altar where she and her child can hide if the worst comes. Agmar, victorious, surveys burning fields and broken Saxon lines, calling his warriors to regroup by the shattered mill. 500 milliseconds. Ealdred soothes panicked villagers in the smoky gloom, promising protection even as the sound of Norse voices draws near. Freydis's warriors breach the first barricade, tearing it aside as villagers scatter into nearby alleys and sheds. Break time, 500 milliseconds. Ceolwyn calms her child with whispered stories of brave ancestors, masking her own terror as splintering wood reverberates through the church. Dagmar and his men loot granaries, filling sacks with grain and salted fish, even as flames consume huts around them. Ealdred overhears a plan to use the church's trapdoor to help the vulnerable villagers escape through an old root cellar. Freydis pauses before a burning cottage, urging a wounded Saxon child to flee rather than face her wrath. Ceolwyn watches in disbelief as elderly villagers disappear beneath the altar, guided by Ealdred's steady hand. Speak. Dagmar, sated from plunder, orders a war horn blown, rallying the Vikings amid the smoke and shouts of the burning village. Break time, 500 milliseconds. Ealdred helps women and children descend into the dark cellar, his voice steady and reassuring in the smoky haze. Freydis stands over a fallen Saxon fighter, pausing to murmur a quiet farewell before moving on through the chaos. Ceolwyn, last to descend, glances upward as flames lick the church's walls. She ducks through the trapdoor, clutching her child. Dagmar surveys the village ruins with satisfaction, but his gaze lingers on the still-standing church tower, curiosity sparking in his eyes. Ealdred replaces the altar stone above the trapdoor, muffling the cries of babies and the prayers of villagers below. Freydis approaches the church, wary of a trap, her shield raised and sword drawn against a possible Saxon ambush. Ceolwyn, huddled in darkness, muffles her child's whimpers as footsteps echo above, her hope flickering in the gloom. Dagmar circles the church, searching for a way in, eyes narrowed as he tests the heavy door and the strength of its barricade. Ealdred braces against the root-cellar's earthen door, whispering a prayer that the marauders above lose interest. Freydis calls out in Norse, demanding surrender and threatening to burn the church unless the villagers reveal themselves. Dagmar's battle-axe crashes through the remaining barricade, scattering the last defenders. Smoke shrouds the village as the Norsemen surge forward, their war cries echoing through the broken timbers. Ealdred urges the villagers onward, lifting a hidden trapdoor beneath the altar. Clutching his staff, he ushers terrified families, including Ceolwyn and her child, into the suffocating darkness below the church. Freydis shouts commands to her shield maidens, directing them to encircle the church. Her voice, sharp above the chaos, rallies the Norse warriors as they probe for a weakness in the sanctuary's stone walls. Inside the trapdoor, Ceolwyn calms sobbing children with whispered promises of safety. Her heart pounds as distant footsteps echo on the floorboards above. The darkness is thick with fear and the smell of earth. Dagmar orders his crew to search the burning houses for loot. The Norsemen tear down doors and ransack possessions, tossing silver goblets and woven blankets into rough sacks. Freydis stands before the church doors, running her hand along the carved wood. She tests the iron hinges, nods to her warriors, and readies her sword. The assault on the sanctuary is about to begin. Below, Ealdred quietly prays for deliverance. He clasps a wooden cross, face grimly set, as the sounds of cracking wood and clanging metal echo overhead, the Norse trying to break in. A Norseman douses a torch and hurls it onto the church roof. Flames lick the mossy tiles. Smoke begins seeping inside, and the villagers in the cellar stifle coughs and sobs, air growing thick. Freydis and Dagmar regroup at the church entrance, debating whether to wait for the villagers to surrender or force their way in. Tempers flare as smoke pours from the rooftop. Ceolwyn whispers urgently to Ealdred, suggesting another hidden exit. The elder nods, recalling a forgotten tunnel leading out beneath the graveyard, hope flickering in his tired eyes. Ealdred leads Ceolwyn and the villagers toward the forgotten escape tunnel through the stifling darkness of the cellar, desperate to avoid the raging fire and Norse axes above. Above, Freydis and shield maidens batter the church doors with axes and shields, their war cries echoing through the smoke-filled nave. Dagmar, covered in soot and blood, directs his men to seize valuables from burning homes, his intense blue eyes scanning for resistance. Inside the tunnel, Aldred urges the villagers onward, feeling along crumbling earth walls. Ceolwyn clasps her child tightly, her heart pounding in her ears. Freydis finally breaks through the church door just as flames threaten the structure, her shield maidens pouring in behind her with weapons drawn.